Hey, what's up, guys? I'm doing a follow-up video to my Nietzsche was right video, another short one for you guys. And this one, I'm going to say that Nietzsche actually is the anti-antichrist. Nietzsche actually disclosed the economy of antichrist in his critique of the pseudo-Christianity that he saw in the time that he was living, and that he, couldn't go deep enough into the Christian story. And his conclusion of Christianity's slave morality, this pseudo care for victims, in disguising the real intent for the obtaining of power. That was his critique of Christianity, that the priestly class was jealous of the noble class and developed the slave morality in order to obtain power over the noble pagan gods and rulers. But what I think he was doing is, in his critique of Christianity, he was accurate in critiquing this superficial, materialistic pseudo-Christianity that we're fraught with today. And I think that without Nietzsche's critique here, we would be worse off in a very strange but real way. And what I'm going to use here is I'm going to read a little bit from Rene Girard's I See Satan Fall Like Lightning to try to give us a window into this idea that I mentioned before, that Nietzsche went mad because his noose, his heart mind, exploded when he realized the truth of the Christian story. At the end of his life, when he went mad, he would sign his name in his letters, the crucified one, and Dionysus, right? And the story of Christ and Dionysus have the same fact pattern, the kind of the same logic. The main key difference is their interpretation, and that is where the heart of the matter lies. And I think you'll see in these few paragraphs that I'm going to read here how important this is for our current zeitgeist of hyper care, pseudo hyper care for victims, right? This fake, woke, whatever you want to call it, is a parasite on the Christian story. It is the Antichrist. The Antichrist is not some big boogie monster that destroys Christianity. It is a pseudo-Christianity. It is Christianity without Christ. It is a shell of Christianity. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I think this is all kind of part of the broader pattern, the broader story that we're living through. We are at a time right now where these antinomies, these tensions of pseudo-Christianity and Christianity are being disclosed to us. And it's beautifully ironic that Nietzsche is the one who really kind of paved the way for this, maybe this resurrection of actual Christianity, right? He said that God was dead, and he said that we have killed him. The blood is on our hands, right? When he wrote that in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he wasn't wrong, right? We did kill God, right? We killed him first in body, and then in spirit, but not really, through the decimation of the organization of Christianity, which was really came into the fold in the Enlightenment period. Right, so taking this view on Nietzsche's work really makes it pop to you. It gives you another flavor, a way of actually supporting this contention that Nietzsche was the anti-antichrist. He was disclosing the economy of the Antichrist. And I think we're living through that right now. And, maybe these words can help inform us as to how to orient ourselves as we go through these transformative times. So I'm going to read here, start from the little bit down through the chapter, the twofold Nietzschean heritage. And I have the entire chapter read in one of my playlists, my I See Satan Fall Like Lightning playlist. So feel free to check that out if you want to hear the whole chapter. But I'm going to read a little bit and I'm going to comment a bit and see if this can become more clear to us. But to suppose, as I do, that the Nazis clearly found in the concern for victims the dominant value of our world, isn't this to overestimate their moral and spiritual insight? I believe not. They found support in the thinker who discovered the anthropological key to Christianity, its vocation of concern for victims. I refer, of course, to Friedrich Nietzsche. This is René Girard, of course. Nietzsche was the first philosopher to understand that the collective violence of myths and rituals, everything he named Dionysus, is of the same type as the violence of the passion. The difference between them is not in the facts, which are the same in both cases, but in their interpretation. The anthropologists investigating primitive societies were too positivist, too confident in the evidence of facts by themselves to comprehend the distinction between facts and their interpretation, how they were represented. Does that sound familiar? In our days, the deconstructionists, right, the precursors to woke ideology, right, reversed the positivist error. For them, only interpretation exists, right? One's lived experience is the only thing that matters. They want to be more Nietzschean than Nietzsche. Instead of getting rid of problems of interpretation, they get rid of facts. Fake news, right? We live in this hyper, the hyper simulation that we're currently fraught with and in the midst of is elucidated here wonderfully by Girard. So again, they want to be more Nietzschean than Nietzsche. Instead of getting rid of the problems of interpretation, they get rid of facts. In certain unedited writings, just before his final breakdown, Nietzsche escapes the twin errors of the positivists and the nihilists. Right here, we're going to get a window into the way in which we can use Nietzsche's brilliant insight here as a way towards, ironically, authentic Christianity, as to Christianity rooted in Christ. And he discovers the truth that I only repeat after him, the truth that dominates this book. In the Dionysian passion and in the passion of Jesus, there is the same collective violence, but the interpretation is different. Here's a quote from The Will to Power. Dionysus versus the crucified. There you have the antithesis. It is not a difference in regard to their martyrdom. It is a difference in the meaning of it. Life itself, its eternal fruitfulness and reoccurrence, creates torment, destruction, the will to annihilation. In the other case, suffering, the crucified as the innocent one, counts as an objection to this life, as a formula to its condemnation. Close quote. Between Dionysus and Jesus, there is, quote, is not a difference in regard to their martyrdom, close quote. In other words, the accounts of the Passion recount the same kind of drama as the myths, but the meaning is different. While Dionysus approves and organizes the lynching of the single victim, Jesus and the Gospels disapprove. Man, that's so relevant for our times, right? This is exactly what I have said and keep on saying. Myths are based on a unanimous persecution. Judaism and Christianity destroy this unanimity in order to defend the victims unjustly condemned and to condemn the executioners unjustly legitimated. Again, let's read that again. So Judaism and Christianity destroy this unanimity, this unanimous persecution, in order to defend the victims unjustly condemned, as well as to condemn the executioners unjustly legitimated. You can see why the Christianity has to be done away with in these times, right? Simply and starkly because of that fact. As incredible as it may seem, no one made this simple but fundamental discovery before Nietzsche. No one, not even a Christian. But beyond this point, sad to say, the philosopher becomes delirious. Rather than recognizing the reversal of the mythic scheme, as an indisputable truth that only Judaism and Christianity proclaim, Nietzsche does all he can do to discredit the Christian awareness that this type of victim is innocent. See, Nietzsche's whole genealogy of morals, his slave morality, is rooted on this pseudo-Christian idea, this idea that Christianity only feigns care for victims in order to obtain power. That's his key faulty insight that I think was he realized right before after he went mad. Let's see, where was I? I'll read that again. Rather than recognizing the reversal of the mythic scheme as an indisputable truth that only Judaism and Christianity proclaim, Nietzsche does all he can do to discredit the Christian awareness that this type of victim is innocent. He sees perfectly well that one is dealing with the same violence in both cases. Quote, there is not a difference in regard to their martyrdom, close quote. But he does not see or want to see the injustice of the violence. He doesn't see or want to admit that the unanimity always prevailing in the myths has to be based on mimetic contagion. I think of mimetic contagion as a mind virus, right? That tends towards violence. And without an authentic Christianity, that will lead to the scapegoating mechanism, and that was the history of the world. Now that things have been revealed, things hidden have been revealed, that mechanism has short-circuited, right? Because Christ showed that the victim is innocent, which has left us in very tumultuous times, as it was written, right? So he doesn't see or want to admit that the unanimity always prevailing in the myths has to be based on mimetic contagion, which possesses the participants and which they don't recognize, whereas the Gospels recognize and denounce violent contagion, as do the story of Joseph and the other great biblical texts. Nietzsche, to discredit the Jewish Christian revelation, tries to show that its commitment to the side of victims stems from a paltry, miserable resentment. Nietzsche, to discredit the Jewish Christian revelation, tries to show that its commitment to the side of victims stems from a paltry, miserable resentment. That is the part that I'm claiming he's disclosing the Antichrist, because the Antichrist is this fake Christianity, is this Christianity without Christ. It is the pseudo care for victims for the sake of power, which I think Nietzsche recognized appropriately in the type of Christianity that he was observing. Observing that the earliest Christians belonged primarily to the lower classes, this is we're getting into the genealogy of morals here, he accuses them of sympathizing with victims so as to satisfy their resentment of the pagan aristocrats. This is the famous slave morality. So this is how Nietzsche understands the genealogy of Christianity. He opposes, so he believes, the crowd mentality, but he does not recognize his Dionysian stance as the supreme expression of the mob in its most brutal and its most stupid tendencies. Christianity does not yield to ulterior motives of resentment in its concern to rehabilitate victims. It is not seduced by a contaminated charity of resentment. What it does is to rectify the illusion of myths. It exposes the lie of the quote-unquote satanic accusation. And here we go to the kind of heart of the matter, right? What it does is to rectify the illusion of myths, right? The ideological capture that is the central theme, the lie of the satanic accusation. And this is this next couple sentences here, I think, hit home with our current predicament. Since Nietzsche is blind to mimetic rivalry and its contagion, the mind virus, he doesn't see that the gospel stance toward victims does not come from prejudice in favor of the weak against the strong, but is heroic resistance to violent contagion. Indeed, the Gospels embody the discernment, and this is it right here, how we can take from this. Indeed, the Gospels embody the discernment of a small minority that dares to oppose the monstrous mimetic contagion of a Dionysian lynching. I put forward that we're seeing a collective Dionysian lynching happening right now. going to read that one more time. Indeed, the Gospels embody the discernment of a small minority that dares to oppose the monstrous mimetic contagion of a Dionysian lynching. Nietzsche had to trick himself to avoid clearly seeing this. To escape the consequences of his own discovery and persist in a desperate negation of the biblical truth of the victim, Nietzsche resorts to an evasion so gross, so unworthy of his best thinking, that his mind could not hold out against it. For it is not by accident, in my view, that the explicit discovery of what Dionysus and the crucified have in common and what separates them occurs so shortly before his final breakdown. Nietzsche's devotees try to empty his insanity of all meaning. We can understand perfectly why. The nonsense of madness plays a protective role in their thought, just as madness itself functions for Nietzsche. Nietzsche, the philosopher, was unable to sit back comfortably in the monstrosities into which the need to minimize his discovery was driving him. And so he took refuge in madness. Christian truth has been making an unrelenting historical advance in our world. Paradoxically, it goes hand in hand with the apparent decline of Christianity. I'm going to read this again. This is important too here. Christian truth has been making an unrelenting historical advance in our world. Paradoxically, it goes hand in hand with the apparent decline of Christianity. I like to think of this as Christ's advance into the world, the individual Christ, right, that came into the world. He made an advance into the world by receding, by dying, right? And I think we're seeing this at the next level, right? As Christianity dies, right, Christianity will be resurrected, in a sense. I think that's what he's getting at here. Christian truth has been making an unrelenting historical advance in our world. Paradoxically, it goes hand in hand with the apparent decline of Christianity. The more Christianity besieges our world, in the sense that it besieged Nietzsche before his collapse, the more difficult it becomes to escape it by means of innocuous painkillers and tranquilizers such as the humanistic comprises of our dear old positivist predecessors. To elude his own discovery, and this will be my last paragraph here, to elude his own discovery and to defend mythological violence, Nietzsche is obliged to justify human sacrifice. And he doesn't hesitate to do so, resorting to horrifying arguments. He raises the stakes even on the worst social Darwinism. He suggests that to avoid degenerating, here we go, societies must get rid of humans who are waste, who are hinder, and who weigh them down. Those that are hesitant to take the procedure are humans who are waste, who are hinder, and who weigh them down. We cannot get back to normal until these people take this procedure. And here's a final quote that I'll leave you with from Nietzsche. Through Christianity, the individual was made so important, so absolute, that he could no longer be sacrificed. But the species endures only through human sacrifice. Genuine charity demands sacrifice for the good of the species. It is hard, it is full of self-overcoming because it needs human sacrifice. And this pseudo-humanness called Christianity wants it established that no one should be sacrificed. Thanks for listening.